Hey guys, welcome to the Stop Renting podcast for Rodrigo Posada,
Kara Berger,
Shoreline Realty,
Shoreline
Sarasota,
Realty
Florida.
now. Yeah.
We haven't done an episode in like 2 months because we started a brokerage.
Yes.
Rod,
busy.
Yeah, Rod went and got his broker's license, and then we transitioned.
He passed! Yay! He did it!
First try. It was very hard, and I'm glad it was. It should be that hard. We transitioned the team from the brokerage that we were in before as a group, and we kept a lot of the same systems in place and became a brokerage
and have the team, and then it's growing, and we're going to keep it growing.
Yeah, we hired 2 new agents since we transitioned over. So
always looking for more.
Looking for more. Yeah, if you're interested in real estate, it's a lot of fun.
We have a
funny
good time.
Story. Yeah, I have so many funny stories. I actually have a funny story.
Oh, you do? Okay, yes. Well, we can do a funny story at some point. Okay.
What are we doing today?
Today, we're going to talk about key factors to consider when accepting an offer on your home.
Okay, cool.
So, is the highest offer always the best one, or should sellers prioritize other factors over price?
So I think that would be where most people think, okay, especially the people I think we don't provide any value, think like it's super easy. Even if I get multiple offers, I'll just take whatever the highest number is.
Right.
Simple math, and I'll walk away great. Obviously, that's not the best way to look at it. There's a lot of other factors: inspection periods, financing versus cash, other contingencies, extra language, pre-approval letters. There's a lot of other factors that you should look into, that you should have a listing agent look into beyond just price. Sometimes it is just the highest price.
Right. I mean, of course, highest price is what people want, but sometimes you do need to look at those factors and see if another offer makes more sense.
Correct. Yeah, and sometimes even when we have buyers that are putting in cash offers, they'll go a little bit lower because it's cash, because they know that if it is an educated seller, the seller would probably take this cash offer at a lower price and a financing offer at a higher price, depending on other factors of the home. Because if you take a financing offer, you still have a financing contingency on top of your inspection contingency. And we have seen it where contracts fall apart, financing contracts, the day before closing.
Oh, yeah, that sucks for this seller. Then they have pending, and then it goes back on.
Correct.
Yeah,
which sucks.
Disappointing for everybody.
So, cash, not cash. Highest price is not always the best factor, is not the only factor to look into when evaluating offers.
Look at it as a whole. Look at everything in the contract.
Correct. And be on the lookout for pitfalls, things that could cause that contract to fall through and put you from pending back on the market.
Right. So, next question. How important is the type of financing, cash offer versus mortgage, when deciding which offer to accept?
So if you have, obviously in most situations, a cash offer would be best. More than likely a cash offer, unless you're super well priced and you have multiple bids right at the beginning. A cash offer is probably going to be a little bit lower than where you're at or what you're expecting, and probably lower than financing offers. Cash being, again, it just has less contingency. So most of the ways that contracts fall through is that the buyer uses one of the many contingencies that were pre-negotiated to back out, whether that's an inspection contingency, an appraisal contingency, a financing contingency. So the less number of contingencies an offer has, theoretically, the safer bet it is, the more likely that offer is going to make it from contract to closing. Cash is always the best.
Cash is king. Yeah.
And then even within within financing, you can have a VA loans, you can have FHA loans, you can have conventional loans, you can have hard money loans, and each of them have their own pros and cons. FHA is one where unfortunately, a lot of sellers try to stay away from it, and it's wrong in my opinion, but a lot of listing agents will try to tell their sellers, do not accept that FHA offer because of X, Y, and Z. Their concern is that it's an FHA financing process, or the mortgage to get an FHA has a lot more ways for it to fail than say a conventional conventional mortgage, because FHA, one of the main ones, we just had one the other day,
right.
The garage had some exposed wiring, and the FHA appraiser came back and said, if somebody doesn't pay to fix this, you're not getting an FHA mortgage on this house.
Right.
My buyer ended up, because of the situation that the seller was in, the buyer had to end up paying for it before closing.
Wow.
To make sure that we got FHA approval. So obviously that's dangerous as a buyer to be putting money into a house you haven't bought yet. So so even within financing, there's different levels. And again, you should have a listing agent who thoroughly reviews whatever pre-approvals come in and make sure that they're legit. And if it says conventional, it actually is conventional. If it's FHA, all
Right.
that good stuff. And that the home is prepared for FHA if you are going to go through
True.
FHA.
Yep. Make sure all of that. What role do contingencies, inspection, appraisal, financing play in the strength of your offer?
So the general rule is the less contingencies your offer has, you as the buyer, the better your chances of getting it approved or accepted, I should say. And whether you're at again, like we said, if you're going to do a cash offer, you right off the bat, you already eliminated the scariest contingency, which is the financing contingency. Therefore, you could leverage that to ask for a lower purchase price.
Right.
So appraisal contingency is pretty straightforward. It means that the house has to appraise. So if you got it under contract at 400, then when the appraiser comes out, it has to be appraised at 400.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, you as the buyer, if you use the appraisal contingency, can go back to the seller and say, hey, this house appraised at 390. You owe me 10 grand. Not you owe me 10 grand, but we need to figure out where the $10,000 difference is because the home didn't appraise. And yeah, financing contingency basically means that the buyer has to make it all the way through the financing process, has to be fully approved. And if they're not for whatever reason, they can back out, get their deposit back, which again does happen. And that's obviously one of the fears of accepting an offer that has a finance that's with financing. But
because then they don't get to keep the escrow.
Yeah, then you as a
seller is kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, you lost 30 days, if not more. You don't get to keep the earnest money because the buyer backed out using the financing contingency. And like we talked about before, after 30 days of being pending, the next buyer is definitely going to ask some questions. You're going to be in you're not going to be in a good position as a seller.
Right, exactly. How can the buyer's earnest money deposit signal how serious and committed you are?
So that's a really good one. It kind of ties into that story that I have. So a lot of people think that the earnest money, because of all the contingencies, that it's kind of like a non-issue. They're like, oh, I can just back out and get it, so it doesn't really matter what I put in.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way I can explain it is that there's an emotional aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
On top of a financial strength perspective, if I don't know if I'm saying that right, but whatever. So if you're able to say put $10 or $15 or $20,000 cash within 3 days, you're in a lot better. You appear to be in a better financial position than somebody who, on the same price house on a 400,000 puts a 1,000 or 5,000
or 5,000.
So,
yeah.
And I just had to have this conversation with a buyer the other day. It's like they wanted to put on a $350,000 house. They wanted to put $1,000 earnest money deposit within 3 days. And I explained to them, thankfully we ended up at 10,000, but they were very adamant. Like, it doesn't matter. We're going to back, if we don't like the house, we can back out during the inspection period. And I said, yes, that's all true. You're even more reason your money's protected.
Right.
But by putting the stronger initial deposit, you appear as a stronger buyer to that seller.
Yep, more serious,
Correct.
ready to go.
So yeah, and we ended up with the 10,000. We got past inspections, but it helped us leverage that financial perspective, that financial strength that they demonstrated, helped us get other things off of the contract that I don't believe we would have gotten if we would have been just at the $1,000.
Right.
And sellers,
1,000 versus 10,000 makes you look a lot stronger.
Correct.
100%.
And the seller can just counter and say, no, you need to put more money down, which a lot of listing agents will advise their sellers, like, no, you're not going to put $1,000. You got to put
they'll come back as a counter or put in an additional deposit.
Yeah, an additional deposit after. So yeah, in a strong deposit just makes you look like a stronger offer. Even if it technically you can get the money back through the contingencies, it's still good to put your best foot forward when presenting an offer.
Right, exactly. Should sellers consider a buyer's flexibility on the closing date when comparing offers?
So yes, that's another one. When we do cash offers, the strongest offer, and I tell people, if you want to get the best price on a house, offer cash and close in 2 weeks.
Yep,
that's
quick close.
Because that gives the seller about as much peace of mind as you can guarantee. Especially if you know the house, you as a seller know the house is in good order and clean title and all that. So if you're willing to close faster, so that's something we do on financing offers. We'll do on or before. So instead of saying just we're going to close in 30 days, we'll say we're going to close on or before 30 days. In case title and financing, everything goes through clean, we close faster. Obviously, for most sellers in most situations, they want to close as fast as possible, get their money, move on to their next thing. So yeah, being flexible with your time frame or being willing to move quickly, even if the seller ends up saying, no, I prefer 30 days or 45. You, again, talking about the strong deposit, the more financial strength you can demonstrate to the seller, the better your overall terms are going to be.
I was about to say, even when it's flipped, if the seller can't move out for a couple months because they're moving elsewhere or something's being built, the buyer, there might be a buyer that wants to close ASAP, but they need to find a buyer that's willing to wait a few more months. So it can go both ways. Flexibility is important.
Yeah, flexibility is important, 100%.
How can sellers protect themselves from offers that look good on paper but might fall through?
Get a listing agent. That's the honest truth. You need to have a listing agent that's able to explain to you all the parameters, all the criterias, all the contingencies, that's willing to take the time to do the research on the pre-approval, on the list, on the buyer's agent who's representing the other side, on the buyer themselves, depending on the price, in most cases, either way. So having somebody who's knowledgeable. So in that time out, I'm going to tell my story. So
story time.
Yeah. One of the ways we get leads is through online, people who are looking online and they reach out, they ask to speak to a realtor. And sometimes those are the way we get leads sometimes. This one person came through and who was adamant to speak to the listing agent for that property directly. I explained to her my honest opinion on that situation, and she went on her merry way and found the listing agent for that contract, for that home, went under contract, spent all the money to do inspections, only to find out that the roof was 22 years old and shot. So, if again, why you should probably have a buyer's agent, which you could have any buyer's agent who's worth her, could have easily said this roof hasn't had a permit, or even just looked, because the roof's 22 years old. You probably tell that it's in bad condition. But either way, this lady, she was financing, so she had to get the roof had to be insurable, and it wasn't. So she spent all the money to do the inspections, and then came back to me and said, "Hey, Rod, like, why did this happen?" I'm like, "Because you went directly to the listing agent who was excited."
That's good. She came back to you.
Yeah, because I was nice about it. I was like, "This is not a good idea."
She's like, "Oh, I made a mistake. Like, maybe if I had you from the start."
Yeah, and I literally told her, I'm like,
"I was like, I told you so."
I didn't say I told you so, but I made it clearly evident that I did say I told you so. But I told her, I'm like, the listing agent, the reality is they're getting double the commission. They're extra incentivized to keep you as opposed to another buyer coming from an agent with their own agent, because the listing agent's going to easily make another 2 to 3%.
Yes, they're like, "Oh, perfect.
Perfect.
This is the winner."
Yeah. So, and their fiduciary responsibility is not to you; it is to the seller. So, why would they come on and say, "Hey, this roof is 22 years old. You're not going to get financing"?
Yeah, like, are you sure? They're going to be like, "All right, sounds good."
Yeah, it's great. You want to put an offer, full price? Awesome. I'll write it up. I'll get it signed. So, which they shouldn't do. I don't know if they did that, but they shouldn't do it. So, more of the story: get a buyer's agent. Stop trying to go to the listing agent in 95% and 99% of the cases.
Yep. Are personal letters from buyers effective in influencing a seller's decision, and should they matter?
So during COVID, we were doing that a lot. Buyers were writing letters because it was a very competitive seller's market, and buyers were scrambling to get houses because everybody wanted to come to Florida. These days, when I did my broker,
I guess it depends on.
Well, I've been told, it didn't come up in my broker class, but I've been told that they're not legal anymore.
Oh, interesting. Didn't know that.
That they can lead to discrimination is the story that I've heard. So
okay, so you can't write
you should
talk about who you are and as a buyer and explain and whatever. Put on your story for the seller.
Plain devil's advocate, I can see where, depending on what the letter says, it could convey information that would persuade. Like if the seller looked at two different, if the contracts were theoretically the same and the only difference was the letters. And I don't know, one was a single family or one was like a single mom. I don't know, but I could see where it could become.
I could see that too. Like, it doesn't matter what your situation is, but everyone has different situations. Or it could be just an investor who's like, I don't care, but like, I want to buy this property. And then you have, working mom or whatever. Like, I get it. Like, obviously, I would lean towards that. So
yeah, I would think. And it worked, and we used it a lot during.
But now it's a no.
Correct. Well, I've been told it's a no by other listing agents. So where they'll just say like, we're not. They'll even put it in the listings. I haven't seen it as much, but like, I don't know, 6 months, a year ago, I was seeing it a lot. They'll like put in the listing, do not submit letters. Letters will not be blah, blah, blah.
Interesting. I mean, I think it doesn't hurt to just kind of explain who your buyers, but I guess it depends where you're at. Like, that's why it's our part. Like, what's our relationship with the listing agent, getting to know them. And if they're really interested and maybe we're going to move forward, they'll be like, okay, so tell me about your buyer. Like, where are they from? What's their situation? Yeah. So it can help, but the letters, you have to be careful.
You have to be careful. Apparently. Yeah. Well, no, and it's other ones that are funny. It's like the listing agents that are like, you set up a showing. This happens to me sometimes. I think it's hilarious. They'll literally just call you and like, no good morning or not. Like, tell me about your buyer. Like,
oh, God,
can you accept the showing first? Can I get a hello?
Yeah.
Tell me about your buyer. I'm like, okay. Are they carrying? I'm like, And I think I calm them down most of the time, but I've gotten some pretty aggressive ones. Like, tell me,
Yeah, but
I was like, cool. Like,
but like anyone should be able to allow to, schedule that showing. And walk
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
you shouldn't
door,
get, which again,
know?
I'm sure at one point that'll become discriminatory as
Probably
well.
at
You
some
can't
point.
ask questions about the buyer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not the, it's like the opposite of the letters, but yeah, I
Yeah.
always think it's funny when they do that aggressively.
Gosh.
You can ask politely.
Yeah. I don't know why people are mean.
I'm a person.
Don't be mean. What are the risks and rewards of accepting a backup offer in case the primary offer falls through?
So the backup offer is super important if you're in a position like a multiple offer situation where you're kind of iffy about, even if you're not iffy about the offer you did choose. If there's a second one that's maybe missing one or two things, it's always good to have a good listing agent who keeps that buyer's agent, I would say on the hook, but keeps them active, attentive, and say, hey, this is where we are with our current offer. Yeah, keep them in the loop, exactly. So that they in turn can keep their buyer in the loop. Because most times if people are searching for a home and they lose the offer to your home, you as a seller, they're probably just going to go find another house. But if you really love the house and then the listing agent says, hey, we still have inspection periods, we still have this or that, they can't disclose too much about the offer that they did accept, but they can give you, hey, inspections last a week. They can give you small ideas to let you know like there's still a chance. It's not often the backup offers get accepted, but it's good to have them just as a backup. Yeah. And you never know, like the person who did the backup offer or who would do this, the buyer who lost the initial round, maybe they don't find another house. Maybe your house was perfect for them. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's good to have. It doesn't hurt to reach out, and if you are interested in a property and it's pending, it doesn't hurt to throw in a backup offer.
Correct.
Yeah, because you never know.
It's the way we on the listings, ones that go pending, it'll say pending accepting backups.
Yeah, accepting backups.
So take those seriously.
How should sellers evaluate requests for seller concessions like covering closing costs or repairs?
So it's a case by case. Right now, we've had a pretty drastic shift in the market, and we're very much in a buyer's market. So seller concessions is something. So I have a few of my listings where I've told my sellers right off the bat, hey, we should offer, instead of lowering the price by whatever 5 or 10,000, we should put that in as a seller credit, and very clearly explain that seller credit can be used at closing by a prospective buyer. If they want to just use it to lower the price, great, or they can use it to buy down the rate. So seller credits is not, it's just a number. As bad as it sounds, it just comes off of whatever if you're going to net 100,000 as a seller, you're going to net whatever that is, 95 or 90. So it's just less money that you take away with, and that money at the day of closing, there's no actual cash transferred. It's just a credit, a line item that gets moved from your side as a seller to the buyer side. But if the buyer is well educated and they know what they're doing, or their buyer's agent or their mortgage guy knows what they're doing, they'll use that money to buy down the rate or some other closing costs. It's very important. And one of the one with the garage, the FHA one, we actually were able to get them a significant seller credit. So we offered the seller the full price for the house, but we asked for a substantial seller credit because it was a young couple and they didn't have much in terms of down payment. So we were able to cover the majority of all their closing costs, and then they got some government assistance for the other part of, I don't know, it was Hometown Heroes, one of the other government. But basically, at the day of closing, they only brought like $500.
Yeah.
Because of seller credits matched with other things. So yeah, it just depends on the market. Yeah. But they are important, and as a seller, they do help if you're willing to accept those, and you should be open to it.
Teddy, you don't fit back there.
Teddy wants to be part of the podcast.
Teddy, you're too big.
You don't fit back there, Teddy.
Okay, the last question, which kind of ties everything in, ish. Is it smarter to choose a slightly lower offer with fewer contingencies, or a higher risk, higher priced offer?
So yes, in most cases, if the difference is a couple grand, then you should probably take the lower one with less contingencies. And a couple grand is very subjective based on the price of the house, based on as a seller, your financial perspective, what's your bottom number, where you listed it at. If you kind of overpriced it to try to get a little bit extra out of it, or you listed it slightly below the market to move it quickly. So there's a lot of variables that fall into that question, but as a general rule, I would say a slightly lower offer with less contingencies, i.e. a cash offer with a 2-week close, and a short inspection period is more. It's going to put you in a better position, less risk than taking whatever, say a full price financing offer.
I agree. You have to be smart about it. You can't just.
Yeah. It's a case by case, which again, which as we said before, if you're a for sale by owner, you have, unless you're extremely well educated in real estate, and you're doing it constantly and you're up to date with all the laws and changes and lawsuits and the lawyers, You probably don't know all the intricate details.
Mhm.
So you should have a good listing agent that's able to thoroughly explain to you the comparables between
Right.
all.
The
But as a
difference.
general rule, yes.
Yes, I agree with that.
Cool.
And that's it for this one. But yeah, stay tuned for our next episode.
Thank you guys.